All right, so moving on. Now, we have a new data type. It's the Boolean basic data type. It holds one of two values, true or false. Its keyword is bool. And a declaration example would be like a bool game over. And if we wanted to assign something, we would use something like bool b light switch equals true or equals false, depending on where we want this bool to start. If we want it set on, which is true, or off, which is false. Okay, now we will get to using these in just a second. But the first thing we have to do is we have to learn how to make decisions. If we aren't able to make decisions in code, we can't make interactions between the computer and the user. That is why we have if, else, and else if statements. So the syntax for an if statement, and these are daisy chained together. So we're going to start off with a basic if. If, parentheses, whatever condition is in the parentheses is equal to true, it will run the if code block. This syntax should start to look familiar by now. Kind of looks a little bit like our method declaration without the return type, right? Name, parameters, code block. If, condition, code block. Now, we can just use only if statements. They can just be used alone. So if we're just wanting to know if a light is on, say RB light switch is set to true, we would just check to see if that one is true. But if we need to check both if the condition is true and the condition is false, so if we're only checking a Boolean variable, we could check for true in the if, and then the else would be the automatic opposite. Else is going to run if this condition is false. This else will run no matter what, unless this condition is true. So notice the else does not have a set of parentheses. That is because it is the last thing that runs. And you'll see more of this when we get into the else ifs. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open Unity now. We're going to set up our day 2, and we're going to actually check our light switch variable. So into Unity we go. New, and this is going to be day 3 project. Now when we're doing this, we have to make sure we remember to actually create the bool before we check for it. So create our empty object, create our C# script, which last name, first name, underscore day 3. Make sure we attach it to the game object. Always click on the game object in the hierarchy to make sure it has been attached. We'll go ahead and double click it to open in Visual Studio. Okay, so in our presentation we had this bool b light switch equals true. We're going to go ahead and create that here. Bool b light switch equals true. Fantastic. Okay. So since we might be playing with this by using serialized fields a little bit later, we're going to avoid putting this in start for right now. We're going to go ahead and put this in update. So we're going to do if you start off typing B and then light, it should come up. If B light switch is equal to true. And then we want to give it its curly braces. Now if you notice, we have our first comparison operator. The double equals is the most widely used comparison operator. We're checking for direct equality. This will come in very important when we start checking for exact text. So if we're checking a string against a string, they have to be exact. Case, spacing, punctuation, all of that has to be exact when we're using these double equal signs. So our light switch, if it equals true, debug.log, the light is turned on. All right, so that's what we're going to do. Debug.log, the light is turned on, semicolon. We got to make sure we save. And now if we go back to Unity and play, there it is, the light is turned on. Now remember, because we're doing this in update, if we don't have that collapse on, it's just going to keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. We turn the collapse on, it just counts up for us. Cool, so our if works. So now we want to make sure we can check the opposite. Because either a light is on or it's turned off, this is one of the cases in which we could use the else. Either the light switch is on, which is true, or the light switch is off, which is false. So since we're going to be doing that, we're going to do else and then curly brackets, debug.log, the light is turned off, semicolon. Now, is this actually going to work? At this point, it will not, because we have our light switch here set to true. Let's go ahead and just change this. We're going to assign it the false value. We'll go ahead and save. And now when we play, the light is turned off. Okay. So now let's go ahead and create another if statement. This time we're going to put both of these. So we're going to change our light switch to a serialized field. We'll reuse that one, and then we'll create another set as well. And we'll see how we can actually switch each of the bool variables on or off. So first thing we're going to do is serialize field. We'll go ahead and save this one, and we'll check it in here. Remember, in order for us to see, we actually have to be clicked on the game object. Now, if you notice, B light switch, it's literally a check mark. So let's go ahead and play it. The check mark should turn on, or will turn on if we switch it to true in the code. I don't think I saved it correctly. So, here's an interesting thing with the inspector. Even though I have set my B light switch to true, because it's a serialized field, and I'll even do a full save all files, when I start Unity, it immediately starts off as false. So you know for sure that this else is working. But while it's running, we can always turn it on, and you can see it is actually turned on. Okay. So let's turn off Unity, stop playing in Unity anyway. And we will move on to our second example for the if else. And we're going to actually do this just a little bit differently. So we're going to serialize a field called bool b game over, and we're going to set it to false. And actually what we are going to do is, instead of checking it like this, we are actually going to check it like this. This exclamation point, anytime you see this in code, it means not. Capital N-O-T. If it's not true, if B game over is not true, that's what all this is saying. B game over is equal to false. All right, so let's go ahead and create first our serialized field. And since we know it's going to start off as false, serialized field, we're just going to declare the variable. We're not even going to set it. So it's going to be bool b game over semicolon. Okay. So if not b game over, curly braces, I'm going to put a comment here. So if b game over is equal to false, then we want to print debug.log the game is still running. Semicolon. And now, because this is also a true or false, we can put in our else for if the game is running. So if B game over is, or if the game is no longer running, if B game over is true, debug.log the variable B game over value is, we'll just go ahead and concatenate our B game over to see how our bools print to the console. So we're going to go ahead and save. We'll go ahead and make sure that you give Unity a minute to switch over. And we'll go ahead and play. So the game is still running. Yes, that means that B game over is false. Now if we hit our switch, the variable B game over's value is true, which is correct. That is our else. B game over's value is true. So Because these are actual Boolean variables, let me turn off Unity. We can either check for not, or say we're working with our light switch. Because it is already true or false, we can just check light switch's value. So if B light switch, B light switch is equal to true. And then B light switch is equal to false. So, because an if statement, parentheses, is always going to look for something that equals true to run its code, when we are dealing with bools, we can always just check the bool itself. We don't need to add on the actual comparison for equals true, or if we were going to check for false, equals false. We can just add that exclamation point. All right, so let's make sure everything works. So of course, the light is turned off, the game is still running. Check. The light is turned on. Check. The game is now over. So those are the basics of the if and else. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a break here, and then we'll move on to doing more if checks. So there are ways that we can actually make a daisy chain of if and else if and else statements. And I hope you guys enjoy what we're going to be using to do this.